Hey, this is Nicky G, and welcome to Better Commander. Today we're going straight to the Bone Zone with Myrkul, Lord of Bones, and his budget Boneyard. Hey, before we get too deep into this nonsense, I want to thank you guys for watching. It makes me happy to puzzle out commander decks and share my research with you all like I'm a dang scientist. Remember to subscribe, hit the like button, because contrary to popular belief, death and taxes aren't the only constant in this world. There is also the algorithm. Myrkul, Lord of Bones. I started reading the lore on this bony bone man, but suffice it to say he lives in the Bone Palace, which is what I called my dorm room back in the day. So he hangs out with all the dead cool guys, like Burt Reynolds and stuff like that. He ascended to godhood from his mortal life. He was a necromancer. I don't know, I didn't really pay that much attention to it. So in designing any Aristocrats deck, you need three things: creatures to sacrifice, sacrifice outlets, and your payoffs. Myrkul is unique in that he has this enchantment sub-theme and the ability to make all your creatures into enchantments. This makes them very hard to remove. Kind of a waste of a removal spell if you think about it. So you have your mana dork, sacrifice outlets, and creatures with static abilities or enter the battlefield effects come back as a sticky, problematic enchantment. The problem is Myrkul costs 7, he has no protection and no evasion. So let's read this god of dark metal edgelords. Myrkul, Lord of Bones, is 4 white, black, and a green for a legendary creature god. It's a 7/5. As long as your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, Myrkul, Lord of Bones, has indestructible. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's an enchantment and loses all other card types. Okay, so we need this guy in the battlefield before we start sacrificing things. The enchantment tokens enter the battlefield, so they trigger ETB effects on entry. Enchantments can tap as soon as they enter. They don't have summoning sickness. The tokens aren't creatures anymore. So we should have a large amount of enchantments entering the battlefield, so it makes sense to run enchantment payoffs and cards that care about enchantments. We also want to run a few creatures that go create immense problems for our opponents when they come back as enchantments. This is a $100 deck tech. So don't expect me to suggest Phyrexian Altar or Doubling Season. If you have those cards and want to add them, by all means. We can make an awesome budget-less version of this commander. This is what I call a turn 8 deck. If your meta ends games on turn 5 or 6, then maybe this won't do as well. If you see games going to turn 8, 10, then this deck will do fine. In limited goldfishing, the deck went off around turn 7 to 8, but as with anything, there's a fair bit of variability in a 100-card singleton format. So let's talk sacrifice outlet, shall we? We have Carrion Feeder. It's 1 black mana for a creature zombie. It's a 1/1. Carrion Feeder can't block. Let me read that again. Carrion Feeder cannot block. Don't forget that. If you sacrifice a creature, you can put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. This can also sacrifice itself. So this is a free 1 mana sack outlet, and it's about 85 cents. We have the classic Vampire Viscera Seer, is also 1 black mana for a Vampire Wizard. It's a 1/1. Sacrifice a creature, scry 1. Awesome. A little better than Carrion Feeder, I would say. Scrying can be really great with a little luck in a deck like this. One of my favorite cards coming out of the latest Kamigawa set is Dockside Chef. 1 black mana for an enchantment creature, human citizen. It's a 1/2. So it has 1 and a black mana, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card. This is an enchantment that helps us with card draw. I will say that the 2 mana activation can be rough at times, but it should get things going. This ticks way too many other boxes to ignore though, and is great in this deck. Erebos Bleak-Hearted is 3 and a black for a legendary enchantment creature god. It's a 5/6 with indestructible. As long as your devotion to black is less than 5, it isn't a creature. Whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature. Target creature gets -2/-1 until the end of turn. This is kind of budget removal and card draw. We can mitigate the life loss with our Aristocrats that are gaining us life. And if we have another sack outlet, we can just pay the 2 life to draw when one of our creatures dies. I think if I was building a budgetless version of this deck, I'd probably include more of the Theros gods. Lampad of Death's Vigil. Lampad? I don't know what the heck. 1 and a black for an enchantment creature. It's a nymph. It's a 1/3. So 1, sacrifice a creature. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So I think this is an underrated sacrifice outlet right here. It's kind of an aristocrat and a sacrifice outlet. Triggers our enchantment payoffs as well. Woe Strider is 2 and a black for a creature horror. It's a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 white goat creature token. Sacrifice another creature, scry 1. It has some escape cost, but it's not going to be relevant in this deck. This is basically another copy of Viscera Seer with a little goat buddy that comes along to sacrifice. Ailey, Eternal Pilgrim, is a white and a black for a legendary creature. It's a core cleric, 2/3 with Death Touch. It has 1, sacrifice another creature. You gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. And it has 1 white and black, sacrifice another creature, exile target non-land permanent. Activate only if you have at least 10 life more than your starting life total. Lots of text on this. Ailey is great in this deck as she can gain us some of the life we're paying to draw cards, and it's a relatively cheap sack outlet. Then we have Vampiric Rites. It's black mana for an enchantment, and it has 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life, and draw a card. So this is just kind of a budget sack outlet that rounds out our sack outlets. When I was playtesting, I felt like I always needed 1 more, and this kind of helps to fill that gap. Village Rites is 1 black mana for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature. Draw 2 cards. Look at this creepy art, man. This is a party that I'd probably skip if I was invited. Plum the Forbidden, 1 black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When you do, copy the spell for each creature sacrificed this way. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. So basically you're sacking your whole board and you're drawing that many cards +1 and losing that many life +1. Super interesting card. It's a big burst of card draw, and we want to sacrifice our board for value most of the time anyway. This can be done at instant speed. So what are we using to capitalize on all of this sacrifice? There are several creatures that drain our opponents when our creatures die. Zulaport Cutthroat, Cruel Celebrant, Vindictive Vampire, and an enchantment Bastion of Remembrance. They all basically have the same text and make up the backbone of an Aristocrats deck. Did want to highlight a couple. Poison Tip Archer, 2 black and a green for a creature elf archer with a reach, and Death Touch. Whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. This is a 2/3. Note that this triggers off of any creature dying. We do a board wipe, and this deals a bunch of damage around the table. This is the best card for any Aristocrats deck using green and black. Sir Conrad. This guy's going to be like Soul Ring. You just add him to any deck that you have. So he's 3 black for a legendary creature, Human Knight. It's a 5/4. Whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent, and it has 1 and a black. Each player mills the card. For each creature who dies when Myrkul is on the battlefield, Sir Conrad will trigger twice, unless I'm mistaken. Once when they die, and once when they leave the graveyard to get exiled. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that's the way it works. Let me know if I'm wrong, because sometimes that happens too. So we have creatures dying left and right, so how do we get value out of that? What are we going to do to keep our hands full? First, we have Grim Haruspex. Probably said that wrong. 2 and a black for a human wizard. It's a 3/2. It has Morph for 1 black mana. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. So that's going to be happening quite often, and we're going to be drawing a lot of cards. Midnight Reaper, very similar card, 2 and a black for a creature, Zombie Knight. It's a 3/2. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. And lastly, and probably leastly, Morbid Opportunist, 2 and a black creature, Human Rogue. It's a 1/3. Whenever 1 or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So we can usually sacrifice creatures on our opponent's turns to get the maximum triggers out of this. Might as well just mention this guy here, but Beast Whisperer, this is a creature-based deck, so we threw in the Beast Whisperer. This triggers off of all of the 50 creatures that we have in this budget deck. Alright, let's get into some Enchantment Payoffs. Citizen Champion is 2 and a green for a creature Human Warrior. It's a 1/3. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Citizen Champion and draw a card. Then we have Eidolon of Blossoms, 2 green for an enchantment creature. It's a spirit, 2/2. Whenever Eidolon of Blossoms or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So these 2 cards I just mentioned are really key to get our engine going. We're going to be sacrificing creatures. They come back as an enchantment. We draw a card. Hopefully we can cast another creature. This deck kind of works like that. You assemble a critical mass of pieces and then the engine just kind of rolls forward. Sith's Harvest Hand is a green and a white for a legendary enchantment creature, Nymph. It's a 1/2. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and draw a card. There are a few redundant effects that have just about the same text in the deck, and we also assembled a critical mass of enchantments. We have an enchantment sub-theme. You probably need about 20 or so to make these cards worth it, but they are when the deck hums. A Johnny's Chosen, 2 white for a creature, Cat Soldier. It's a 3/3. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white cat cat creature token. If that enchantment is an aura, you may attach it to the token. So this is on ETB, and we'll be making quite a few tokens off of this and the next card as well. Archon of Sun's Grace, 2 white for a creature Archon. It's a 3/4. Has flying and lifelink. Pegasus creatures you control have lifelink. It also has whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying. Very similar to a Johnny's Chosen, but better in almost every way. This thing can put out an army of flyers very easily. Moon Blessed Cleric, 2 and a white for a creature human elf cleric. It has Divine Intervention. When Moon Blessed Cleric enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top. So this is a 3/2. This can get us removal, it can get us draw, it can get us sacrifice outlets, whatever piece we need. Plus we can sacrifice it, it enters the battlefield as an enchantment, and we can go get another piece that we may need. Alright, let's talk about a couple cards that work uniquely with our commander and probably should never have been able to get made into an enchantment. First we have Cinderhaze Wretch. It's 4 and a black for a creature Elemental Shaman. It's a 3/2. It has tap. Target player discards a card. Activate only during your turn. You put a -1/-1 counter on Cinderhaze Wretch, untap Cinderhaze Wretch. So if we get this onto the battlefield with the sack outlet and our commander, then we can put all our opponents into top deck mode by putting as many -1/-1 counters on this as we want. It'll be an enchantment. Nothing happens when we put a million counters onto it, so we just keep having them discard every time it gets back to our turn. Alright, pretty similar thing with Devoted Druid here. It's 1 and a green for a creature elf druid 0/2. Tap, add green, and put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid, untap Devoted Druid. So we're just making infinite green mana at this point once we get this thing to become an enchantment. Palisade Giant is 4 white for a creature. It's a giant soldier, 2/7. All damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control is dealt to Palisade Giant instead. So this card and Protector of the Crown make it so we don't lose to damage-based effects. You can fling damage at an enchantment all day, but we can still lose the game effects, milling out, stuff like that. So of course Sanctum Weaver is in this deck, but I did want to highlight one interesting thing about this card in mana dorks in general. So Sanctum Weaver's 1 and a green for an enchantment creature Dryad. It's a 0/2. Tap, add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. If you sacrifice this with Myrkul on the board, you can double dip on their mana production. The enchantment token comes in and doesn't have summoning sickness, obviously. It can tap as soon as it lands because it lost its creature type. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. This is a super interesting commander. It could be extremely powerful in a budgetless deck. Elish Norn, Platinum Angel, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Nyxbloom Ancient, along with Parallel Lives, Doubling Season. This could be a really nasty deck. So as always, I want to thank you guys very much for watching and appreciate all the subs and likes. And this is going to be Nicky G from Better Commander, signing off.